I was called into a sterile conference room, the air still and cold. My boss sat across the polished table from me, a tight, artificial smile on her face that didn't hide the flicker of annoyance in her eyes. "Madeline," she began, her voice smooth and practiced, "the UK team is having a conniption. They feel you're undermining them." She leaned forward, the smile tightening even further as her voice dropped to a condescending hush. It was the kind of tone one uses to explain something very simple to a child. "I need you to stop helping your old staff," she said, her words sharp and precise. "When they ask you questions, you are to tell them to email their new manager in the UK. No exceptions." The sheer, breathtaking stupidity of the command hit me like a physical blow. She wasn't just asking me to follow a new rule. She was ordering me to deliberately inject a 24-hour delay into our workflow for what was often a 5-minute question. In that moment, she wasn't just my boss. She was the architect of chaos, and she was handing me the blueprints. My name is Madeline, and for years, I was the engine of the US programming department. I wasn't just a manager who assigned tasks and sat in meetings. I was the senior programmer, the mentor, the one person on the floor who could look at a tangled piece of code and find the single flawed line in minutes. I built my team not just to be productive, but to be a self-sufficient, problem-solving unit. Our efficiency was my greatest professional pride. Then came the consolidation. It was a word that sounded sleek and modern in a corporate memo, but felt like a sledgehammer on the ground. I was stripped of my management duties, though they were careful to keep my pay the same to avoid any immediate trouble. My new boss, a woman from corporate who seemed to value neat organizational charts more than actual output, assured me it was a streamlining measure. She spoke of global synergy and breaking down regional silos, using buzzwords like a shield against any practical questions. But I could see the truth quite clearly. My team was now officially managed by a group in the UK, 6 hours ahead of us. And those managers, who had never met my team in person, were deeply insecure. They resented the fact that whenever a real problem arose, my people still came to me. They couldn't stand that I could solve an issue with a 5-minute chat at my desk while they were still asleep in their beds. To them, my competence wasn't an asset to the company. It was a threat to their newfound authority. The efficiency of my team, my life's work, was hanging in the balance, threatened not by a technical challenge, but by petty corporate politics and jealousy from across an ocean. I had trusted that my results and my team's performance would speak for themselves. I was wrong. I sat there in that cold conference room, her ridiculous order echoing in my ears. Tell them to email the UK. I pictured it perfectly. A developer hits a roadblock at 2 in the afternoon. He sends a detailed email. The UK manager sees it the next morning, at what is 3 in the morning for us. He might spend an hour trying to understand the problem before forwarding it to one of his technical leads, who then has to try and solve it without being able to speak directly to the person who has the issue. A simple problem that I could solve before my coffee got cold would now cripple a developer for an entire day, maybe more. It was a blueprint for failure, a meticulously designed plan to bring our productivity crashing to the ground. And my boss was ordering me to enforce it. The initial shock faded, replaced by a cold, quiet clarity. For years, my loyalty had been to the work, to the elegant solution, to the efficient running of the machine. But the machine was now being run by people who wanted to pour sand in the gears to make themselves feel important. My boss looked at me, expecting me to argue or protest. But I didn't. I just nodded slowly. A patient, meticulous plan began to form in my mind, as clean and logical as a perfect piece of code. She thought she was putting me in my place. She had no idea she was setting me free. She wanted chaos. I would give her exactly that. She wanted chaos. I would give her exactly that. I walked back to my desk not with rage, but with a chilling, crystalline clarity. The hot anger I expected to feel was replaced by a cold, quiet purpose. My boss and the UK managers didn't want efficiency. They wanted obedience. They wanted to feel like they were in charge, even if it meant running the entire project into the ground. Fine. I would give them the most perfect, disastrous obedience they had ever seen. I sat down in my chair, my hands steady on the keyboard. I opened a new, blank document on my screen. The cursor blinked patiently, waiting for its instructions. With the same care I would use to write a critical line of code, I typed a single, polite sentence. Per management's directive, I can no longer assist with this. Please forward your question to your assigned manager in the UK. I saved the document to my desktop, naming it simply the template. My war had begun, and I hadn't even raised my voice. The first test came less than an hour later. A young, brilliant programmer named Ben, one of my best, came to my desk holding his laptop, a confused look on his face. It was a familiar routine for us. He would show me the problem, and I would point him in the right direction in under a minute. Madeline, I'm getting a weird server error I've never seen before, he started. I held up a hand to stop him, my expression calm and professional. I calmly clicked on the template, copied the text, and pasted it into a new email addressed to him. I looked him straight in the eye as he read it from my screen. Ben, I said, my voice even, I've been given a direct order to no longer help. You need to email the UK team. I watched his face as he processed the information. First, confusion, then a flicker of frustration. And then, as he truly understood the implication of the words, a slow, knowing grin spread across his face. He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. Time for some malicious compliance, huh? Just following orders, I replied, my face unreadable. He nodded once, the grin widening. Loud and clear. He walked back to his desk, not with frustration, but with a new spring in his step. Later that afternoon, I called a brief meeting with the rest of the team. I explained the new protocol in the same detached, professional tone. I told them my hands were tied and that all questions, no matter how small, had to be routed through the new, official channels. They knew exactly what this meant. They were a smart, loyal team that I had built from the ground up. They understood the absurdity of the situation perfectly. My plan wasn't to sabotage anything. It was to simply step back and let the system they designed fail under its own idiotic weight. My weapon was their own policy, and my shield was my instruction to follow it perfectly. My weapon was their own policy, and my shield was my instruction to follow it perfectly. For the next 2 weeks, that shield proved to be made of solid steel. I simply programmed. With no one to manage and no interruptions, I closed more complex tickets than I had in the last 6 months. My focus was absolute, my code was clean, and my personal productivity reports were flawless. Around me, however, the machine was grinding to a halt. The shared project dashboard, once a sea of calming green, began to bloom with yellow warnings. By the end of the first week, those yellow tags had turned to a glaring, undeniable red. Project timelines were slipping, one day at a time. My old team, bless their hearts, followed the new rule to the letter. Every single question, no matter how trivial, was put into a meticulously detailed email. They attached screenshots, cited error codes, and copied their assigned UK bosses on every single one, creating a mountain of digital evidence. I would overhear their frustrated sighs throughout the day. The phrase, "Well, I'm blocked until tomorrow, I guess," became a common refrain as they were forced to shelve their work in the middle of the afternoon. The UK managers were drowning in a flood of technical questions they couldn't answer, and I was just sitting there, quietly, coding. The summons came after 3 weeks of this carefully orchestrated chaos. I was called back into the same sterile conference room. This time, my boss wasn't alone. 2 of the UK managers, looking pale and jet-lagged, were sitting beside her on a video call projected onto the large screen. The smugness was completely gone, replaced by a thin sheen of collective panic. My boss wrung her hands under the table, a nervous habit I had never seen from her before. "We've come to the realization," she said, her voice strained and artificially bright, "that due to the significant time difference, there should be a manager located here in the US. She said it as if it were a brilliant strategic breakthrough. I just stared, my face a perfect mask of polite interest. I let the silence hang in the air, thick and uncomfortable. I let them sit with the weight of their own breathtaking incompetence. "We'd like you to resume your management duties," she finally stammered, the corporate poise completely deserting her. I allowed a pleasant, placid smile to form on my lips. It was a calm, patient smile, the kind one gives when listening to a slightly foolish but harmless suggestion. "Thank you for the offer," I said, my voice soft and even. "But I'm quite happy just programming. I find I'm much more productive this way. I really don't need the extra work." The flicker of sheer, undiluted terror in their eyes was more satisfying than any shouting match could ever be. In that moment, they understood. They had not only created this disaster, but they had also given the only person who could fix it a perfect reason to say no. They had lost control, and they knew it. They had lost control, and they knew it. The week that followed was a masterclass in corporate panic. I heard whispers of emergency calls, of frantic emails flying back and forth between the US and UK offices. The project dashboard bled red, a constant, glaring reminder of their failure. I simply continued my work, a calm island in the middle of a storm of their own making. They didn't have the authority to fire me. My personal performance was impeccable, and the paper trail proved I was only following their direct orders. They couldn't hire a replacement in time to save the project. Their only move was to come back to me, but this time, they knew they couldn't come back empty-handed. A week later, they called me back to the conference room. The atmosphere was different. It wasn't a meeting, it was a surrender. A formal offer letter was already sitting on the table, printed on high-quality paper. My boss slid it across the table to me. "We have created a new position," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "Director of U.S. Development. It comes with full autonomy over the team, the budget, and the project timeline." I picked up the paper. The number they had written under the salary section was a significant raise from my old management pay. It wasn't just an apology, it was a price. It was the price of competence, the cost of fixing their colossal mistake. This time, I accepted. The change was immediate and absolute. The UK managers are now completely neutered. They receive a single daily report that I write, and they have no direct contact with my team. Their performance reviews are now tied to my team's success, a success they are utterly powerless to influence. Their jealousy has been replaced by a quiet, resentful dependence. My boss speaks to me with a new, profound respect born entirely of fear. The condescending smiles are gone, replaced by a cautious, professional courtesy. She knows that I didn't just fix the problem. I demonstrated that I was capable of letting the whole system burn, perfectly and professionally, if I was pushed too far. I run my department with the efficiency I always knew was possible. With full autonomy, I've streamlined our processes, empowered my developers, and our productivity is now higher than it has ever been. My team is happy, the work is excellent, and I am paid handsomely for the very expertise they tried to sideline. They wanted to put me in my place, and in the end, they did. They just didn't realize that place was far higher, more powerful, and more lucrative than before. They tried to teach me a lesson about the corporate hierarchy, but instead, I taught them a very expensive one about respect.